From the entrepreneur who started recycling New Orleans' glass in her dorm room, to the team of artists and scientists turning Ohio's pollution into paint, and the nonprofit using human hair to clean up oil spills in California.
I mean, this is literally just the hair from your head.
We looked at 11 ways companies, NGOs, and regular people are making money off America's garbage.
Matter of Trust has been making hair mats since the year 2000. Founder Lisa Gauthier sources hair from salons in over 30 countries.
We have what we call the hair force.
The donated clippings arrive in small batches.
People mail this in every day. We get, roughly 10 or so envelopes a day. We get a lot of blondes. As you can always tell when we get a package from Los Angeles, like right away, blonde, blonde, blonde. A lot of redheads in Boston. This is probably from Boston. We've been told that we got a package of underarm hair from Michael Phelps and the Olympic swimming team.
The team also uses animal fur.
Clippings from alpaca, buffalo, sheep, etc., llamas.
Lisa and her team of felters start by cleaning the bags of donations. A lot of these were swept off the floors of hair salons.
Pins, cigarettes, food, anything sharp, anything hard that might break the needles, all of that is garbage. I don't find it gross at all. I have a lot of hair and it doesn't bother me. It's part of the charm of it.
The felters lay out the human hair on this bed of dull nails and start to layer it with animal fur and fleece.
We had to learn that we needed to not use sharp nails because it would start to slice the hair. And David invented this for us, and he created it so that this thing just lifts up and it's really easy for us to remove it afterwards.
We get out and make it more neat and faster.
Then these machines tighten the fibers. The final product looks and feels like a doormat.
Feel how sturdy that is. It's really sturdy.
The idea to use hair to clean oil spills started in 1989 with Phil McCrory, a hairstylist from Alabama.
He was watching the Exxon Valdez oil spill in William Sound, Alaska, and on CNN it was showing the otters covered in oil and the water around them a little bit cleaner.
Phil looked down at the oily head of hair he was shampooing.
And it just sort of snapped for him. You shampoo because hair collects oil. I cut, a pound of hair every couple of days. All of this could be going to clean up oil spills.
So 10 years after Phil came up with the idea, Lisa partnered with him to scale up. At first, they stuffed nylon stockings with hair to make booms shaped like sausage.
We're going to stop doing as many booms as we have because they needed the nylons, which was again plastic, to hold them together. And we're going to start doing more mats because mats add surface area. And so it just collects even more oil.
That idea was put to the test in 2010, during the largest oil spill in American history. BP's Deepwater Horizon spewed 4 million barrels of oil into the Gulf of Mexico over 3 months. And Lisa's team got a flood of donations.
We just started to get in ponytails from people just, cutting it off. And then, of course, it was spring and it was shearing season. And turns out there's buffalo herds in the United States. So there was a lot of fleece just coming at us in trucks and mail trucks and everything. It was fantastic and overwhelming. We had 19 warehouses, about 100,000 square feet each from the Florida Keys all the way to Texas, right on the water because people are just so generous.
Lisa says that a representative from BP reached out to her about a partnership. Insider asked BP about that, but the company didn't get back to us. In the end, the oil giant didn't deploy her hair booms. NOAA, a governmental organization, helped run the cleanup effort. Scientists concluded that hair booms weren't as effective at removing oil as booms made with polypropylene, an oil derivative.
The booms would get water oil, they would get saturated in water, become heavier than the water and start to sink in the water. And then whatever oil they had on it sunk with it, and recovery was very, very difficult trying to get those back out of the environment. You don't see that with the poly booms. These polys do not absorb water like our hair does.
BP instead tried to burn the oil off, but the fires only covered a small percentage of the spill. The company also sprayed dispersants to dissolve the oil and push it toward the ocean floor, where much of it remains today. And those chemicals can make people sick. But the consensus was that the oil was less harmful at the bottom of the ocean than washed up on shorelines.
It's a trade-off. Sometimes they use the word net environmental benefit, but it's not net plus, it's net less bad.
Still, locals along the coast used Lisa's hair mats to protect their beaches.
The EPA told us that our BP response was the largest grassroots mobilization they had ever seen. And I was out there in Mississippi, Alabama, Louisiana, Texas, and Florida.
Eventually, BP was able to plug the leak on its own. But Matter of Trust proved it could mobilize thousands of people to address an epic catastrophe. The number of large oil spills has gone down in recent years. But Matter of Trust is now focused on a much more common problem: motor oil that drips from cars on the road and makes its way to the ocean.
There's many ways that oil gets spilled, and the way that we concentrate on is oil that contaminates our waterways is actually just drips on the street, mixing with rainwater and getting into storm drains.
And those drips add up to over 180 million gallons per year. That's 16 times the amount spilled by the Exxon Valdez. Another use for the hair mats? The US Air Force is experimenting with them to manage chemical waste on its bases.
They're doing a very large system with contaminated water reservoirs.
And once the mats have done their job soaking up oil, how does Matter of Trust plan to get rid of them?
It actually can break down into compost. It takes a really long time, and it's not our number one idea for the circular economy. What we think is better is if we have really clean incineration.
Even as she grows her business, Lisa wants to make sure her hair mat process remains an open source technology.
Phil McCrory had a patent which expired, and we all decided that it's everybody's hair, and we're a public charity, and we thought that it was best not to renew it, and we just thought it's something that should be offered to the world.
She's shipped her machines to more than a dozen partners around the world.
We just had a really great meeting, a big Zoom meeting with all of our partners around the world, and everybody was super jazzed because I think we're just getting into that next level now where we're looking at how to send out more and more machines. And we have one in London, one in Wales, France, Switzerland, Finland, Athens, Greece, Tokyo, Santiago, Chile.
And she says it's possible to do this work from home.
For us, cottage industry is the future. Anybody can make a little felted experiment just by putting a bunch of hair and fur in your shoe and walking around in it for a while. The heat from your heels and the sweat and the jostling from your shoe, you pull it out and you will get a little mat.
And you've tried this?
Oh yeah.
You usually need sand to make glass. But this entrepreneur crushes bottles back into sand. She co-founded what could be Louisiana's biggest glass recycling operation. And in about 2 years, she saved 4 million beer bottles worth of glass from landfills.
Never let anyone tell you that individuals cannot make a difference, because all of this is thanks to incredible individuals.
Glass Half Full operates in a state with a disappearing coastline. And it's ramping up at a time when global supplies of sand are actually running out.
We are using up sand at a faster rate than it can be naturally created.
So volunteers use the crushed up glass to help rebuild the coastline. But is dumping material made from trash into nature a good idea?
There's a ton of skepticism, mostly about the sharpness of the sand.
We went to New Orleans to see how one company is building back shorelines with worldwide waste. Francisca Troutman started Glass Half Full with her boyfriend in February of 2020, while they were still college students.
One night during college, over a bottle of wine that we knew would end up in a landfill, we decided, instead of continuing to complain about the problem and the lack of glass recycling, that we would just do something about it.
So we had this idea, but that was about it. No waste management experience, no recycling experience.
They raised about $18,000 to cover startup costs, including a machine that could grind up one bottle at a time.
Crowdfunding in the beginning was really crucial. It not only got us money, but got us a lot of community support as well.
As this literal mountain of glass started to form in my residential neighborhood, we're like, okay, we gotta do something here, quick.
Since moving into this warehouse in August 2020, they've received a non-stop avalanche of glass to recycle.
We're receiving so much more glass than we're able to process, as you can see by the mountain behind me.
Traditional recyclers send the crushed glass to manufacturers, which mix it with other materials and then melt it all down to make new bottles. But Fran says there aren't any of these facilities nearby.
And then it doesn't really make sense environmentally because you're spending all of that gas to send a super heavy product 4 hours away.
So they decided to skip that step.
The goal was always to be able to recycle the glass locally.
Glass Half Full receives about a garbage truck load of glass per week. People can drop it off for free or pay to have it picked up.
Once a can is full, we will dump it into our glass mountain. Unless it's a special color, it'll be mixed into here.
Colorful bottles can be turned into specialty sand that sells at a higher price.
So this is blue sand made from Bombay gin bottles. Artists really love to use it. People love to use it in their gardens.
But most bottles are thrown onto what Fran calls Glass Mountain.
So Glass Mountain is always expanding and contracting. We're always adding glass to it and taking glass away to be crushed. Woo!
Eventually, workers scoop the bottles up with this loader and dump them into a crushing machine.
It's metered out into the conveyor belt, and it'll go up this conveyor belt and hit the hammers where it'll be crushed and then turned into sort of a mixture of sand and gravel and labels.
The pulverizer leaves behind some larger chunks of glass that are too big to use.
Everything that's bigger than 3/8 of an inch will be taken out. So that'll include labels, metals, caps. Anything non-glass will come out of this process.
They're still figuring out what to do with these leftovers.
The newer models allow you to send this waste stream back through the system. So we're working on raising money in order to get that new system.
For now, it's piling up in the back of the warehouse.
Can we reuse it? Can we recrush it? How can it be utilized instead of sending it to the landfill?
Fran and Max try to get creative with all kinds of non-glass stuff people drop off.
We separate all the metal for metal recycling, and the plastic we're separating for a special project. Stay tuned.
Like taking dirty cardboard that can't be recycled to a pig farm to become compost. At the warehouse, some usable sand is piling up too, because one crucial piece of equipment is too small.
You can really see the difference in size of this compared to our machine. So our machine can process a lot quicker than this can sift.
The sifter filters out any leftover label pieces and sorts the sand by size.
And you just scoop the unsifted product, put it in the top, and it'll shake it all down until it's separated into each of the 5 sizes.
The largest grains of glass help pay the bills. Glass Half Full sells them as gravel. Some buyers mix it into flooring. The smallest type of sand is a fine powder.
This is like the consistency of flour. It's extremely soft. I wish everyone could touch it and walk on it.
It goes into sandbags the company gives away for free.
People use sandbags to put up against their doors, up against their homes, anywhere where water could get in, because we're super prone to flooding here.
In between the powder and the gravel is coarse sand, the kind Fran and Max use to rebuild the coast.
So this is like the size we would be using for coastal restoration. You can see it's not sharp, so it's not going to cut me.
At an event called a deployment, the Coalition to Restore Coastal Louisiana dropped about 10 tons of recycled sand along Lake Pontchartrain.
This is the battlefront that y'all are helping us to protect today. Thank you for coming.
Fran and Max hand out the sand in burlap bags, which were donated by local coffee roasters.
We like being able to move it with manpower and kind of get as many people involved as we can. It's a really beautiful thing to see.
Volunteers load them onto a boat.
Thank you, Fran.
Hey, no problem.
Then the team drags the 35-pound bags to the site. They layer the sandbags in a line, connecting two pieces of land. These sacks will biodegrade in about 6 months. U.S. Fish and Wildlife agents returned with more volunteers a week later to plant bulrush saplings. The idea is that the plants will take root and hold the sand in place, creating new land. Fran and Max spent a year working with scientists to make sure their product was safe for ecosystems.
We were awarded a grant from the National Science Foundation to work with Tulane University scientists and engineers to dive deeper into that research.
They found that sand made from glass doesn't leach anything into the water, and that plant life can grow in it.
And it actually looks like it grew the best in the mixture of the recycled glass sand with the native sand, which is really cool.
The researchers haven't tested whether animals can eat it yet, but Fran has.
And that's actually been tested on my dog, who ate a lot of the sand one day, and we were like, but she pooped it out, so all good.
That's all really good news, because even though Louisiana's land loss has been slowing down, huge chunks of wetlands could still be swallowed up in the next few decades. These areas are essential habitats for wildlife, and they help protect nearby communities from storms.
You can imagine a storm which is fueled by the warm waters of the Gulf of Mexico. As it begins to cross over wetlands, it begins to weaken.
That's especially important in New Orleans, because the city is sinking. It was built above sea level in the early 1700s, but today, about half of it is below. Meanwhile, rising global temperatures make storms stronger and cause ocean levels to rise. So New Orleans needs all the storm and flood protection it can get. If that weren't enough, there's another problem Fran and Max want to take on: a shortage of sand globally.
And that's because we use sand in a lot of things, so concrete, phones, toothpaste, paint, coastal restoration, sandbags.
But you can't use just any sand.
It's a sand shortage of a specific type of sand, which is a coarser, a bit more angular sand.
That means desert sand doesn't cut it. It's too rounded from being blown around by the wind. Most industries dredge sand from the bottoms of lakes and rivers.
Dredging is really the only mechanism right now to get sand. Extremely costly, both environmentally speaking and fiscally speaking.
A lot of it's used in construction. Every year, more than 4 billion metric tons of sand go into glass and concrete for buildings. Glass half full is a long way from making a dent in that. Fran and Max hope their story will inspire others to make a difference.
I think this is really more so the story of a community coming together to say we demand change and we're not going to wait any longer.
2 individuals decided to start this, and now over 2 million pounds of glass are not in a landfill, and they're making a difference in other areas.
With routine maintenance, a wind turbine can last about 30 years. But things like lightning strikes and extreme weather can shorten their lives. Just one blade is about as long as the wingspan of a large commercial jet, like a Boeing 747. And that's just on land. Offshore turbine blades can be twice as long. Both types are made mostly of fiberglass, which is generally made by squeezing molten glass through tiny holes, creating fluffy glass fibers, which can be coated with resin and made into sheets. Factories glue sheets of this material together with a special kind of resin that, once it sets, can never be melted again. That makes conventional recycling, which usually involves melting and reshaping, impossible. That's where Canvas steps in. The company gets blades from around the continental US. They're too big to transport whole, so contractors slice them into quarters before shipping. They arrive like this, and the first step is slicing them even smaller. This diamond-encrusted rope grinds and disintegrates the fiberglass instead of sawing through it to avoid splintering. One slow, steady slice takes about 4 minutes. The team calls these pieces fillets, and each one will become the base of a final product. A single turbine blade can produce quite a few of them.
It really depends on what products we are yielding, but typically anywhere from 10 to 45 fillets per blade.
Inside the wash bay, workers hose them down to remove dirt and grease that built up during use.
So every blade gets power washed in a system that takes all the water we use and then recycles it so we're not wasting water in our process.
Some fillets have extra material inside them that craftsmen saw off and sand down. They spread a filler putty to even out the surface and smooth over any damage from their time in the air.
They can get hit by hail, they can have bird strikes, some get hit by lightning.
Once the fillet is a smooth, hollow shell, the team builds a metal frame inside of it. These aluminum beams will form the main support for the seat of a bench. Welders secure them into place. The founders of Canvas drew design inspirations from pilot projects around the world.
We were inspired from bike racks and bridges that were being built over in Europe. What we wanted to do was develop a series of products that could be created at scale.
But one challenge is that each fillet has a totally unique shape.
Each one is different, even if it was right next to the other one in the blade.
The 2D scanning tool outlines it exactly.
Every little bump, every little divot in that blade is recorded.
These computer-controlled routers read the digital outline and cut a piece of wood to match, which is called a subfloor. Workers then glue the subfloor onto the metal frame.
We use a composite board so that the cavity doesn't need to be filled with material to its entire depth.
With all the main pieces in place, it's ready for painting. Painters make a two-part epoxy by mixing ingredients that form an extra durable seal.
Makes it low maintenance. Graffiti comes off. It's not that easy to scratch up, so it'll look good for a long time.
The painted bench is ready for finishing touches, like a soft rubber seat. A worker measures and adds granules, made from another company's manufacturing scraps, that will become the top layer of the seat. Then he weighs a liquid binder and adds it into the mix. The team spreads this mix over a base layer of recycled granules made of old tires and shoes. None of the craftsmen at Canvas worked on wind turbines before. They're mainly builders and skilled trade workers.
Taking something that's so big and turning it into a functional piece of furniture, art, that was amazing.
Employees like Joe Koger are happy to give turbine blades another chance.
They may have had a life on a farm doing their job. I think they deserve to keep on going.
Meanwhile, wind turbine designs are changing quickly, becoming bigger and more efficient. But that means older wind farms are falling behind the times and need to be replaced. This is called repowering. It can make a huge difference. A wind farm in Spain replaced 69 aging turbines with just 7 new ones. And they're so much more efficient, the repowered farm creates twice as much electricity as before. So farm operators have a business incentive to upgrade their fleets. But, of course, that contributes to the growing piles of leftovers. Once fully assembled, the team prepares their products for delivery. Just one of these benches weighs over 600 pounds. The team screws the products to boards, which they strap into place on the truck bed before tying everything down. 5 benches, 4 planters, and 1 picnic set are headed to the Great Lakes Science Center in Cleveland.
It tells that story on what happens to things that we use, how are things recycled, and what is the second life of them.
The center didn't pay anything for these. Instead, sponsors cover the costs, a total of about $42,000.
There were local restaurants and bars, there were law firms and health and fitness centers, and then there were some national brands.
In return, those businesses get their name on the pieces next to a QR code that leads to more information.
They inherently have a great story because they're made of retired materials.
Or customers can buy the goods directly from Canvas. Some of the products at the Science Center are a bit more ornate than the others. These are part of a program called PAR, which stands for Primed and Ready. For that program, the team paints the furniture with only a coat of white primer creating a canvas for artists like Tessa LeBaron, who get paid $1,000 per piece.
I'm used to painting a mural that just like one flat surface, so it's interesting and fun to work with something that has curves and to create like organic elements.
For now, Canvas only takes blades from land-based turbines, not the much larger offshore ones. And in general, projects like this are not common. In the US, the cheapest option is to send fiberglass blades to landfills, which has caused some controversy. In 2020, images of a turbine blade graveyard in Wyoming went viral, sparking backlash. Meanwhile, in Europe, which has much less landfill space than the US,
at least 4 countries have already banned landfills from accepting turbine blades, encouraging other options like burning them for energy or chemical recycling. With 9 months of manufacturing under their belt, the Canvas crew has placed more than 1,000 of their products around the US. The venture isn't quite profitable yet.
We made $8 this year. 2023 will not be a profitable year as a startup, but we definitely see a bright future.
So far, the company has repurposed about 250 blades, but the founders estimate they'll reach 3,000 in 2024. However, not all of them will be upcycled.
We also see blades that come in too damaged to actually be turned into our products.
In 2024, the founders say about half the blades they get will be upcycled, and the other half will be shredded. One of the first blade recycling efforts in the US piloted this technique. A company called Veolia grinds blades into a soft mixture that looks like mulch. It pays cement factories to burn the material as fuel in place of coal. The main goal is keeping blades out of landfills, but Veolia estimates it could also reduce CO2 emissions from cement making by about 25%.
So we will have our own resources in-house to grind that material down, our manufacturing scrap and damaged blades, to send it to cement kilns, which is what Veolia does.
Over time, they hope a higher percentage can be upcycled, and ideally, new innovations unlocked.
There's people working on a process called pyrolysis that hopefully can break the material back down into oil and glass fiber.
Experts say fiberglass blades are not going anywhere anytime soon.
The problem with using metals is that they're heavy. Fiberglass gives us the same strength, the same properties, but for much lower weight.
It's also pretty cheap. It's hard to find a replacement that can match all these qualities. But lots of people are working on the issue of blade waste, including another business that's rethinking turbines entirely. A company called Heirloom is building wind farms that look completely different, with no giant blades. The company says it costs about a quarter of what a typical wind farm does to build. If something like this took off, it could be an issue for Canvas's business model. But the founders are confident they won't run out of material.
For the next 10 to 15 years, we will still have thousands, tens of thousands of blades that need to be recycled or upcycled. So we support solutions like Heirloom.
So if wind energy creates so much waste, should the world use less of it? Well, basically, every form of energy leaves waste behind, including burning fossil fuels, which creates billions of tons of planet-warming CO2 every year. In terms of solid forms of trash, solar panels become tricky to recycle electronic waste, coal burning produces toxic coal ash, refining oil leaves behind sludge, and so on. One study estimates there could soon be 400,000 metric tons of blade waste piling up each year. But when you line that up with other types of energy waste, turbine blades are on the low end. And to put it in perspective, global household trash outranks it all.
With any movement forward, there are going to be, hopefully, a lot more pros than cons, but there will always be cons. There are always people waiting out there to highlight the cons of anything.
Experts also say there's room for optimism, even when it comes to tricky fiberglass waste.
If you throw enough money at problems, then you can usually solve them. And money is now being thrown at these problems, and there really are good solutions coming out.
This massive pile of pine trees will be turned into cardboard packaging.
A single box can contain material from thousands of trees and pass through the hands of hundreds of workers.
They're like, it's just a box. And I say, no, it ain't. a lot goes into it.
If you've used a cardboard box in the US today, there's a 1 in 3 chance that International Paper made it. It's the world's largest paper company. Cardboard is essential for countless industries, protecting items as they move on trucks and ships. And the good news is that it's one of the most recycled materials in the world. But if so much of it gets reused, why do we still have to cut down millions of trees? And is it possible to make environmentally friendly cardboard? This mill in Georgia is just one of hundreds of facilities operated by International Paper. It runs 24/7 to meet demand from online shopping, grocery stores, and more. But no one in this industry would call their product cardboard.
Why don't you like to use the word cardboard?
Because it's not cardboard.
Insiders call it corrugated packaging, a wavy layer sandwiched between 2 flat outer sheets. But yeah, most people call it cardboard. Making it starts with living trees. Forester Alex Singleton walked us through an area whose trees were sold to International Paper 2 years ago.
It has since been replanted with longleaf pine.
But it will still take decades for the new crop to mature.
For many foresters, we only see a site harvested once during our careers. From this stage to there would probably be around 30 years.
After harvesting, landowners make money selling their trees to different industries, which makes them into things like lumber, telephone poles, and of course, paper. The idea is to turn forests into an investment, so more people plant and maintain them.
Without young, healthy forests, our industry could not be successful. I don't view logging or clear cutting as negative, it's just the start of a process.
But critics say that replanting trees is not the same as letting them grow.
This is one of the most industrial and heavily logged forests on the planet.
The southern US, sometimes called America's wood basket, is home to 2% of the world's forested land. Yet it produces nearly 20% of our pulp and paper products, which either means it's highly productive or highly exploited, depending on who you ask. On a typical day, about 300 trucks loaded with freshly cut trees drive up to this mill. The first stop is the wood yard. Some of the trees are set aside into these massive piles, which ensure the mill can sustain round-the-clock operations. They come from farms and forests within 120 miles. A sprinkler keeps them wet so they stay fresh and to reduce the risk of fire. A crane scoops trees from the pile and drops them into a machine that knocks off the bark.
With a debarking drum, you're removing bark. You know, I tell kids similar to like a potato peeler.
This process creates tons of leftover bark, which will be burned for energy. The debarked trunks travel through a chipper and pile up here.
On that wood chip pile, we can keep up to around 100,000 tons of chips.
It'll only take the mill about 10 days to work through this mountain. A conveyor belt feeds into the next step, pulping. Pine is made of long, stringy fibers held together by a natural glue-like material called lignin. Paper makers want the fibers, but not the glue, so they use steam and chemicals to dissolve it. The reaction can create gas that smells like sulfur. If you've ever noticed a rotten odor while driving by a paper plant, that's probably why. International Paper says its plants are built to capture a lot of those gases, which cuts down on smell. The fibers are covered in a toxic mix of chemicals and tree residue, so they have to be cleaned.
That liquor that's washed off gets evaporated and consolidated and goes into what we call a recovery boiler.
In other words, the plant burns those goopy leftovers, creating steam and chemicals that can go back through the process and save energy.
We're really plants inside of a plant, so we have our own chemical plant, our own power plant.
In fact, this mill makes about 75% of its own energy on site. IP is also burning less coal than it used to, which helps cut down on factory emissions. But trees hold a lot of carbon, and the company's own sustainability report says carbon released by processing the trees was more than double its emissions from burning fossil fuels in 2022. Before the pulp becomes paper, workers add used cardboard to the mix. Old packaging gets a new start in this warehouse.
The boxes that we use here in the recycle plant come from local retailers and grocery stores up to a 300-mile radius from the mill.
Katie Fries has worked in this recycling mill for 3 years. She says people still have a lot of misconceptions about the process.
Our process is designed to take out the stuff like grease and tape. Just recycle any corrugated box you have, whether it has tape on it or food in it. It can be used to make paper again. Then you can recycle a pizza box.
Every day, this mill recycles 500 tons of used cardboard. Each ton saves trees, energy, and water. Saving water is key because nearly every step of papermaking uses lots of it. The used cardboard also gets pulped, using water and chemicals, then mixes with fresh fibers. Workers simply call this massive contraption the paper machine. It presses the pulp flat and squeezes out water. Then it sends the mixture through a series of dryers, heated to over 200 degrees Fahrenheit.
As it goes down the machine, the sheet gets drier and drier.
And after all that, you still only have paper. To become corrugated packaging, the rolls head to a box plant, like this one in Illinois. Here, flexible paper becomes sturdy boxes.
The heartbeat of the plant is the corrugator.
Corrugating is how the packaging's middle layer gets that distinctive wavy shape. The waves are actually called flutes, and they're what gives this type of packaging its strength.
There are different types of flutes. Smaller ones print better, aren't as good for stacking strength, and the larger ones don't print as well, but they're better for stacking strength.
This plant can make boxes in over 1.6 million different designs.
The smallest box I've ever made was about the size of a ring box. The largest box I've ever made in one of my facilities was for a washing machine.
After gluing the layers together, finishing touches include printing on graphics and cutting the sheets into their final shapes. To save space, most boxes shipped to customers flat, and any trimmings or waste pieces can be recycled right back into the process. In the US, more than 70% of used cardboard gets recycled, which is much higher than the rates for aluminum, glass, or plastic.
Corrugating paper is easy to recycle because the supply chain supports it, so there's value in it.
It also helps that nearly 80% of Americans can recycle it using bins right on their curbs. So why does the industry still use up so many trees? Part of it is that old cardboard can't be recycled indefinitely. The EPA says it can only go through the process about 7 times. Each time it goes through pulping and blending, the long, strong pine fibers get a bit shorter and weaker. And eventually, the degraded paper bits simply wash through the screens and out of the process. So recycling is very important. But even if 100% of boxes got reused, making new ones would still mean cutting down trees. Some experts say the big question is whether the industry manages forests responsibly. International Paper gets more than 90% of its fiber from trees in the southern US, where the vast majority of woodlands are on private property.
What we do is we provide a viable market for that landowner's trees such that they will have the income or revenue to be able to pay for the reforestation that takes place on their lands.
Foresters and paper companies argue that without that market, people might just sell their land, potentially losing forests forever to agriculture, parking lots, or other uses. Data from the University of Maryland shows that tree cover in the US today is about the same as it was in the year 2000.
For me, as a forester, it must mean that we're doing our job right, that we're taking care of the environment, that we're promoting forest growth.
But measuring forest area is complicated. To start, not everyone agrees what a forest even is.
Pine plantations are not forests. Those are tree farms that lack the diversity, the structural diversity, the biological diversity that a lot of these species depend on.
An environmental nonprofit called the Dogwood Alliance says that tree farms have been replacing natural forests. That could potentially have a global impact. Some experts estimate that natural forests are 40 times better than plantations at storing carbon, which makes them crucial to slowing climate change. Forests have lots of other benefits too, like filtering our drinking water and reducing erosion. Certain forestry techniques, like leaving some large trees in place, can help planted forests retain those benefits.
I think there are ways to sustainably manage forests without taking out the larger trees and completely destroying the structural complexity of a forest. But that takes really skilled, targeted forestry, and that's not always what happens.
Ultimately, the world uses a lot of paper, which has to come from somewhere. You might see certifications stamped on boxes. Those are supposed to indicate they're made of trees that were harvested sustainably. International Paper says that more than 30% of the fibers it used in 2022 came from forests with one of those certifications.
I think there is a way for industry and conservation to coexist in southern forests, but there has to be a good faith effort on all sides.
It's harvest day at Pine Run, a creek in Ohio.
Yeah, keep going. Moving now. Yeah, I see the flow.
Michelle Shively McIver and John Sabraw have been making pigment out of this pollution for over a decade.
This stuff is just really good.
Yeah, it's our favorite.
It is our favorite.
Their team built a system of pipes that collect smelly goo called acid mine drainage, or AMD for short. It's highly acidic water leaking from an old coal mine that closed over 100 years ago.
When you leave a mine and you just walk away from it, what happens is it fills up instantly with water.
There really is no way to seal the mines completely.
The water that still leaks from mines today creates iron oxide, which can be lethal to aquatic life.
That pipe is full of iron sludge, and it's going to come out of there really fast.
But it also happens to be an essential ingredient to make paint.
Buckets!
We need buckets! It's a low-tech system right now.
That's what this team is harvesting today.
It's gold, Matt. It's gold!
The team filters buckets of iron oxide using these troughs.
Smooth it out and put some Cool Whip on there, and it's like pumpkin pie in a bin. I'd eat it.
Today's haul is over 200 pounds of iron oxide. It's a bit more than this mine site pumps out in a single day. Wow. Then they move it to their research facility, where engineers wash the pigment to remove impurities that affect the final color.
Basically, we're just diluting out all the dissolved solids.
This is Guy Riefler. He's an engineer who partnered with Michelle and John to start True Pigments.
It still kind of shocks me that Sunday Creek is this orange mass and it goes right through several communities, and it's been doing it for 20 years, and aside from us, nobody's really doing anything about it.
The team dries the pigment before shipping it off to a giant kiln. They change the color by controlling the temperature. Then they send the pigment to Portland, Oregon, where Gamblin Artists Colors uses it to make paint.
We wanted to be the first to make color with it. We were just kind of all in. There's 3 colors that are all made from pigment that has been painstakingly reclaimed by John and team.
This one is called Iron Violet. This worker mixes the pigment, zinc, and flax oil. And a mill uses heat and pressure to combine the pigment and oil.
And so with a little bit of pressure, we draw it down.
Then workers test for thickness, texture, and color. Finally, they bottle it up. Gamblin markets the paint as reclaimed earth colors. John teaches art and uses the paints in his own studio.
If I want something deep and red and earthy, you're not going to get anything better than an iron oxide.
He says his art helps to start conversations about protecting the environment.
The circle gives them permission to decide for themselves instantly whether that is a universe, a planet, a stream, or microbes.
And the new colors are taking off. Painters across the country have shared what they've created using the hashtag #ReclaimedColor. For now, True Pigments can't harvest enough iron oxide to clean up an entire stream.
It has such a satisfying plop.
But the company plans to scale up. By 2024, True Pigments plans to open a larger facility. It will harvest iron oxide and clean the water at one of Ohio's most polluted acid mine sites. That would mean the company could harvest raw material that could be used in all kinds of products, not just paints.
Construction materials, concrete, bricks. It's used for a lot of industrial coatings, agricultural fertilizer, cosmetics. We really had to find something useful to make out of this really, detrimental pollution.
And Michelle says her team's method of retrieving iron oxide is more sustainable than mining it. Unfortunately, they're dealing with a nearly unlimited resource. There are nearly 10,000 square miles of abandoned coal mines across the United States.
Iron oxide didn't do anything wrong. Iron oxide is not to blame here. If you treat it right, like we're doing, it is a valuable asset. It is beautiful.
These mines will continue producing AMD for hundreds of years.
But Michelle is confident that turning pollution into art can make a difference.
Asphalt pavement might be the world's most recycled material.
My gut feeling is that asphalt can be recycled indefinitely.
But most recycling plants mix just a small amount of old product into mostly new pavement. That means we have to keep mining rocks and drilling oil just to keep roads in shape. One company says it's found a way to make 100% recycled asphalt.
You ask any old-time asphalt guy, and they give you a dirty look and laugh and say it's impossible, it doesn't work.
For years, Green Asphalt fought to prove its product is durable enough for New York City. Recycled asphalt usually costs less than the brand new stuff. But if it's that simple, why isn't everyone rolling out roads made from worldwide waste? Asphalt has two main ingredients: crushed rocks and a sticky mixture that holds them together. That goop is mostly bitumen, a fossil fuel originally found in tar pits. People have been using this stuff for thousands of years to waterproof containers, build stone walls, and seal boats. Its first use on a road was likely in Babylon more than 2,500 years ago. Asphalt roads came to the US in the late 1800s, and within a few decades, demand grew so much that natural sources couldn't keep up. So it became more common to make bitumen using crude oil. As oil prices rose in the 1970s, more people started reusing old pavement to cut costs. But regulators often limit how much old material can go into new mixes, usually around 30%, because of concerns that adding more would make roads weaker. That creates leftovers that can pile up.
If New York is going to mill up 1 million tons of asphalt and only is allowed to replace it with 30% recycled, what are you going to do with those 700,000 extra tons? It has to go somewhere.
100% recycled asphalt could make use of all of it, and eliminate the need for rocks mined from quarries.
The carbon footprint savings is the fact that we don't have to truck stone and oil from all over upstate New York.
In a place like New York City, which is almost always tearing up its roads to access utility lines underneath, asphalt recycling is a perfect match.
You'll pave a brand new road and then Con Ed will come and dig a trench through it and
You know, nothing stays down for 10 years anyway.
To strip old asphalt off the road, workers use either a specialized machine that cuts and grinds up the pavement, or less precise methods. These old pavement pieces are called millings, and cities have to figure out what to do with all of them.
To recycle it saves a tremendous amount of money. You're not trucking it upstate, you're not trucking it to landfills.
Their next stop is this plant. On a typical day, Green Asphalt receives up to 50 dump trucks worth of product.
So back here is where trucks full of New York City's asphalt, old millings come in and get dumped every day.
Most of them will get right back in line and leave the plant filled with fresh, recycled asphalt. But the first step is crushing up the millings.
That machine on top of the pile is our excavator. He grabs the material, throws it in the crusher, and that's where we process the material.
A magnet picks out any metals.
Garbage, debris, leaves, the stuff that you see laying all over the New York City streets does not make good asphalt. If any plastic or road striping or fabric from the road base gets in it, that gets picked out by hand.
A conveyor belt carries the pieces through screens that sort them into 3 sizes: black sand, small rocks, and bigger ones. They'll be mixed back together in different combinations, depending on whether the asphalt will be used for potholes, private roads, or highways. Then it's time to turn up the heat. This flaming drum warms and mixes the asphalt at the same time.
After it's reached a temperature of 300 degrees, it's properly mixed. It comes out of the drum. We douse it with 0.5% of a paraffin oil.
Paraffin oil is still a type of fossil fuel, but recycling has lower overall emissions compared to making new product. The paraffin helps rejuvenate old asphalt, which degrades as it sits on roads.
And basically brings it back to life.
These mixes have to stay hot in order to spread onto roads smoothly, so the clock is ticking.
Asphalt has to be made and sold within 24 hours. You can't leave it up there for too long.
The final product is temporarily stored in silos.
Try to get 3 silos full of material. So as trucks start to take it, you're just running and keeping up with the trucks.
These aren't just any trucks, though.
The trucks are designed where the exhaust from the truck runs through the body of the truck, and that actually helps keep it warm.
Green asphalt mixes will end up on roads all over New York City. Here in Queens, workers are repaving 2 city blocks using 100% recycled asphalt. It'll take 14 workers about 5 hours. Anthony Rose has been in this business for a decade.
More and more companies are starting to use recycled asphalt, but not fully recycled. We are one of the few companies actually using 100% recycled.
These pavers say it's no different to work with than conventional asphalt. At the beginning of this job, excavators tore old asphalt off the road. It'll head back to green asphalt to start the process all over again. The company sold its first 100% recycled product in 2011. Convincing customers it would be as durable as new asphalt was a big hurdle.
We had to almost give stuff away for free. Everyone just has that old mindset, like if it's not broken, don't fix it.
The company runs quality tests every day to make sure each batch meets government standards, which vary depending on its final use.
Different things on bridges, different things for tunnels, different things for airport runways, things like that.
Matt Harrison runs those tests, which include checking how much air and moisture is in each batch.
Like a lot of people that don't use a lot of recycled material don't think it can be done because they don't process it the way we do. You know, like they don't test for all the little things that we do.
Despite the extra steps, Green Asphalt says its fully recycled mix is the cheapest option.
Our asphalt product here, which is 100% recycled, is actually 20% cheaper than our conventional asphalt.
In fact, one study found that the more you recycle, the more costs fall, mostly because you don't have to buy new rocks or binder to hold them together. That helps explain why, in countries like the US, Japan, and Finland, more than 90% of old asphalt gets reused in new roads. But if it's cheaper, why isn't fully recycled asphalt more popular? For years, asphalt producers and recyclers have fought a common enemy, blue smoke. It's a catch-all nickname for air pollution released while making asphalt. Some of these emissions can cause blood and liver problems. The more recycled asphalt in a mix, the more pollution you can get. Green Asphalt says it's found a way to minimize that problem.
You have to find the right distance between the flame and the aggregate so you don't catch on fire.
But even then, the process can create some blue smoke. The company told us its filtration system catches it.
It actually uses some water and patented bags that we designed ourselves here that filter out anything that could be harmful to the environment.
The idea is to clean up the emissions before they actually leave this smokestack. Blue smoke concerns are one reason many asphalt makers stick to about 30% recycled mixes. Older plants can't safely go above that without new equipment. Jim says economic incentives also play a key role because many asphalt plant owners also own quarries.
They own the stone or the oil supply that they're using in their products. Why would they want to recycle when they're using their own product and selling their own product? We're trying to break that trend. We don't want to buy stone. We don't want to buy oil. We want to make recycled asphalt.
Even if the whole world did switch to recycled asphalt, there'd still be some downsides. The black pavement absorbs heat, which is part of why cities are up to 5 degrees hotter than nearby areas. Alternatives, such as concrete, create a lot more planet-warming pollution, but usually don't need to be replaced as often. Asphalt has stayed popular because it offers a smooth ride, and its formula can be tweaked for different weather conditions. And since it's probably not going away anytime soon, we might as well recycle as much as possible.
Our mission is really for all asphalt to be green asphalt across the world. If people think your dream is crazy, then you must be doing something right. When everyone said we couldn't do it, it made us want to do it even more.
These are old printers, computers, and phones, and this machine's shredding them to be recycled. Only about 17% of all electronic waste ends up like this.
It's very hard to recycle electronics. They're not designed to be recycled.
There are hundreds of tiny pieces hidden in every device, from toxic materials to plastic to gold. And they each have to be separated and recycled individually. Such precision takes lots of people, space, and heavy-duty machines, with a good deal of feminine power.
Sally is our big shredder. Heidi is German. Ginger's our metal finder.
Female-dominant machines.
Of course, yes.
And if everything goes right, there's lots of money to be made.
We'll pull off the pieces which will be of value.
That's Ingrid, president of Sims Lifecycle Services, one of the largest e-recyclers in the US. Ingrid took us through her biggest facility to see how it's repurposing or recycling up to 6 million pounds of old electronics every month.
So we're in Laverne, Tennessee, just outside of Nashville. This is a 200,000 square foot facility where we focus on receiving, processing electronics.
Sims mainly gets electronic waste from office gear, like laptops, computers, printers, or phones.
We have Fortune 500 companies like HP and Lexmark, insurance companies, banks.
The rest of its clients are secret, but Ingrid can tell us what happens to these devices once they get here.
Reuse, repurpose, re-engineer if we can't reuse it. Very last resort is recycling. What you see here is where we first get the material in. It's a FIFO type of process, first in, first out. That's how we work it. Here she's offloading a truck, so she'll go in, get her forks into the pallet and pull it out. This must have come from an office refresh. It looks like there's some old DVD players, some old stereo equipment.
The first stop, the scale.
Then they will get the weight and input it into our data center. And that's what Drew is doing over there with the computer. Then it gets tagged with a barcode. It'll tell us whether we go to destroy, recycle, or we go to reuse.
The building's broken up into recycling on the right and reuse on the left. We'll start here.
If we can reuse it and reuse the parts, then you're not making a new part. So this is the part harvesting area for laptops. Sometimes when you can't sell a whole laptop, we can remove parts from it and either rebuild a laptop to sell or sell the parts.
To get all these tiny pieces out of a device without hurting them, It takes a lot of skill and
different screws, a lot of different screws.
So much of it still needs to be done manually and to do it properly, and that's very labor intensive.
Memory units, processors, screens, keyboards, and motherboards can all be reused. Workers will clean them, check that they're functioning, and send them back into inventory to be sold again.
Lots of times when we're allowed to sell units, we'll do revenue share with it. So we'll share revenue with the client. So that's kind of a nice way to add life to the electronics and then also get some revenue back.
Big hard drives pulled from computers or servers are another moneymaker, but they come with an added challenge of security.
You can see the fence up. You need a key card to get in. I don't know if I have access. Oh, I do. So here is where you'll see the higher value material.
Any stored data has to be wiped before a drive can be resold.
We have a lot of banks and insurance companies as our clients, so you can well imagine that those folks want their data erased properly. This is where you'll see some of the wiping going on of the hard drives. At the end here, these have already been done, so they're ready to go to the next step to get resold. So our drives will sell wholesale or on eBay. You can see these guys are deemed for eBay. So you'll see 1 terabyte, 500 gigabytes, all different size drives. These smaller drives, there just isn't any value in it anymore.
So if something's simply not worth Sim's time to refurbish, it's sent to be recycled.
On the other side is destroy, recycle. And over here, we have a lot of folks that are depackaging and also removing hazards.
This part's called demanufacturing.
So we'll remove hazards, batteries, and all that type of thing before it goes to be shredded. On this side,
there's a lot of hazardous materials in electronics, like mercury, cadmium, and lead. And if devices end up in landfills, that bad stuff could do major damage to groundwater and soil.
This is what we want to ensure does not go into the shredder because this could be really dangerous for fire. If we leave toner in there, I mean, it goes up like nothing. Toner is explosive. And then the plastic acts as a fuel source. That's our biggest challenge.
Everything that's not hazardous gets shredded.
So this is Lori, and Lori is running the shredder. All with a mouse, right, Lori? This is the control room.
I have control of how much goes in the shredder, how much is on the belts. I can stop the belt, I can speed it up, I can jog it.
It's a 400 horsepower quad shredder, which means you have these teeth that are grinding up all the material here, and those are nice printers that are getting eaten up and ground out to this on the outside. And this is really, really cool part. It's very noisy. The first thing that we're trying to do is remove any steel.
A giant magnet overhead pulls out all the steel.
This is where the charge is added to the material, and based on the plus and minus will repel. So the aluminum gets thrown the farthest away, so that's why aluminum is here. Then the circuit board is in the middle, and the plastic falls right down because it doesn't accept the charge.
The leftover mix heads to another machine named Heidi.
Heidi is German. Originally, we were using it to separate plastic, but the technology wasn't keeping up. It doesn't work on black plastic, and you see today, everything's black plastic.
Now, Heidi separates everything using infrared technology.
Ginger's our metal finder. She was named after the engineer who designed her because he had a ginger beard. And ginger is just taking out any further metal that's still within the plastic mix.
What's left goes into the Dutch sink float machine, named Otto.
So I guess that's the only male machine we have.
In Otto, plastic floats, while everything else sinks.
We scoop off the top, the good stuff, and that's what will go to Montreal to our plastic compounder, and then goes back to HP to get reused into parts.
And those raw materials can make Sims some pretty good money.
So we really want to recover that value.
Every electronic has precious metals in it.
Some gold, some copper, some platinum, some palladium.
So all these elements can be separated and sold to be reused piecemeal. The copper and precious metal streams will go to a copper smelter in Canada or in Europe or Japan. The steel will go to a steel mill here in Tennessee.
But with more than 75% of e-waste landfill bound, companies are missing out on huge profits. To put it in perspective, in 2019, an estimated $57 billion worth of precious metals and valuables in electronics were thrown away or burned.
If we recycle it, then we're not digging holes and mining for virgin metals. It's a way to get some really precious commodities without expending all that energy and damage to the environment.
But it's a catch-22. Recycling e-waste could be a moneymaker, and it's better for the environment, but it's both really hard and expensive to do.
They're not designed to be recycled. Many different chemical compounds all smashed together. When devices got smaller and smaller, removing whole components became less and less possible.
Treating and disposing of these hazardous materials is dangerous and pricey. Recyclers also have to constantly upgrade machines and processes to keep up with this changing technology. And that's costly too.
We normally change the blades once a year, and when it gets towards the end, the blades get a bit dull. That's when we get a little bit anxious, and sometimes they're jams.
Sims has invested 1,000 hours updating just its Sally the Shredder machine. And while recyclers are facing all of these challenges, e-waste is only expected to increase by 38% over the next decade. So is there a way to make e-recycling easier? Some say it starts with manufacturers.
What a lot of the manufacturers are focused on, rather than making products live a long time, they see their way out is to keep selling as many products as they can as rapidly as possible. And they try to compensate by saying, don't worry, it's recyclable. And so this churn and burn mentality is very harmful.
Jim thinks one solution could be for manufacturers to create electronics that are actually meant to be recycled. For example, making devices that don't have toxins, so they're safer and easier to break down. But until that happens, Sims will keep wiping and shredding those hard-to-recycle electronics. New York City's Department of Sanitation sends its fleet of 2,000 garbage trucks to start picking up at 5 a.m.
You have to keep active. Some guys like to work out, some guys don't. Basically, it depends on you.
What do you do?
Me? I don't work out. This is my workout. This is my daily workout.
That's Frank, a 23-year veteran sanitation worker.
Well, you get immune to the smell. You don't smell garbage, you smell money. Checking to see how solid it is. You can tell when the truck is full.
Frank heads to the dump station in the Upper East Side. By then, the sun's coming up.
We are currently at 91st Street MTS. Doors will open as the truck comes in, and there's radiation detectors that will read the truck.
Trucks pause at the weigh station to help the city keep track of how much trash New Yorkers produce. Then handles tilt the hopper.
Then she'll push the blade, and the blade will push the material all the way out to clear the whole truck. It's roughly 450 to 600 tons a day.
Tractors move the trash into the containers beneath the ground.
It's sort of a dance. One FPL will clear the wall, and one FPL will load containers. Getting the material containerized as quickly as possible and sealed keeps that smell down.
A stamper then packs in the garbage. Mattresses are used like a sponge to sop up anything left over.
When we have garbage on the floor, it'll take anywhere from 10 to 15 minutes to load a container.
Once the Department of Sanitation seals a container and slides it out to the dock, responsibility then goes to Covanta. The waste-to-energy company handles 2 marine transfer stations in the city.
Containers are picked up by the crane and put on the barge. 48 containers go on the barge.
Every one of these containers represents a truckload that we have taken off of the city streets and out of the tunnels, reducing carbon emissions and reducing congestion and wear and tear on the city's infrastructure.
A tug attaches to the loaded trash barge. Tug Captain Jason Harris is now in charge. He gets the go-ahead for a 9:30 a.m. departure.
What you see here is called Hell's Gate. This is the upper end of the East River. Tides play a major factor in the times that we can transfer barges.
You can't go against the tide when it's max tide. It's too strong. We would actually come to a dead stop on this boat and barge. You wait until you can go with it.
Quite often a barge gets filled up and we will have to wait 2, 3, maybe 4 hours before the tide is in the favor.
He navigates this heavy load safely along one of the busiest waterways in the world, down the East River, through New York Harbor to Staten Island. 3 hours later, the tug and barge back up into the global transfer station.
It is an inherently dangerous operation to move heavy equipment overhead.
Then a train takes it to one of Covanta's waste-to-energy facilities. It can also get there via truck. All of Manhattan's residential trash goes to waste-energy facilities like this one, to be burned and turned into electricity. This facility processes up to 1 million tons of waste annually.
Once the trucks scale in and come up to the tipping floor, they dump in front of one of these bays.
Tractors push the trash into a massive storage pit, 93 feet deep and 270 feet long.
Between 8,000 and 9,000 tons are in the refuse pit. It's about 3 to 4 days worth of trash.
A giant grapple claw descends over the trash. In one swoop, it can pick up as much as one trash truck carries. The claw builds a wall of trash to prevent it from avalanching onto the tipping floor. It also helps to make more space for incoming refuse.
You look at garbage a very different way since I've been working here. We create a lot of garbage as a population.
Two claws work together in tandem, dumping trash into hoppers leading to the incinerator. Romeo's an expert giant claw operator.
21 years of playing the crane.
There is no shortage of fuel for our boilers. Toy Story is the first thing everyone thinks of.
Disney actually got inspiration for the Toy Story 3 incinerator sequence from a Covanta plant. The incinerators burn the trash at 2,000 degrees Fahrenheit. It takes 1 to 2 hours to burn an entire hopper load.
We've now entered the control room area of the plant. This is the brain of the operation. Yes, it is. And here's your brain. He's got camera views of the combustion zone.
How important are you for this place running correctly?
How important am I? I am the guy. I am the guy.
He's in the hot seat.
Russell monitors as the furnace heats up steam, turning this turbine and generating enough energy to power this plant and 46,000 homes in the region. After everything's burned, all that's left over is ash and metal. This magnet pulls off enough metal to make 21,000 cars. The leftover ash goes to cover landfills. Next, the plant tackles those nasty fumes that burning trash causes. First, leftover gases go through a scrubber reactor. A lime slurry cleans any acid gases, and activated carbon absorbs pollutants. Then it goes through a baghouse, basically a bunch of filters. So what's left coming out of that smokestack?
Constituents of the flue gas is what's in normal air, like nitrogen, carbon dioxide, moisture. The alternative to this would be going to a landfill.
Waste to energy does produce CO2 emissions. But in a year, this process eliminates 1 million tons of CO2 emissions a landfill would have produced.
We generate a very small amount of methane. The methane we offset from a landfill results in an actual decrease of CO2 emissions.
The city hopes to keep moving trash on waterways to facilities like this one. It's all part of its goal of becoming zero waste to landfill by 2030, but that is becoming harder and harder to reach. Only about 30% of New York City's waste turns into energy. The rest ends up in harmful methane-producing landfills as far away as South Carolina and Ohio. And it takes a significant investment to move it. Every year, exporting trash costs the city about $400 million. So why does New York City send its trash so far away? In 1881, New York City streets were notoriously filthy. So dirty, people were getting sick. So the Department of Sanitation was established to clean up the streets. And the department did help mop up the city, but the city quickly ran out of room to put all of its trash. In the early 1900s, the city turned to dumping trash into the ocean. Even though it was illegal, as much as 80% of the city's trash ended up in the sea. This continued until 1934, when a Supreme Court case forced the city to stop ocean dumping. In the 70s, incinerators used for much of the 1900s were closed down because they didn't meet the EPA's clean air standards. So the city opened up landfills across the 5 boroughs, including at one point, the world's largest. In 1973, New York even built out Lower Manhattan using trash mounds. But even that wasn't enough. With nowhere else to put it, the city began sending its waste to other states.
Most of the landfills in this area have been closed down, so the available landfills are getting further and further away.
Exporting trash is a costly practice with a big environmental footprint, and it puts the burden on communities far from these shiny skyscrapers. For now, New York City's only choice is to keep exporting the trash. But ultimately, the department says the best solution would be getting New Yorkers to waste less altogether.
Trash is like one of those things that you put it outside and forget about it. I think everybody should know what happens to what they get rid of. If you know where it's going and you don't like where it's going, maybe you'll find ways to recycle things.
I would never take anything home because my wife wouldn't allow it. But there'll be a but there. If I see something that's Star Wars, I'm gonna look for it and if it's good, I'm gonna take it home.
About 1/3 of all waste in New York City comes from construction and demolition sites. Almost all of that is reusable, but most of it ends up in landfills.
That's a problem, and it needs a system change. It needs a redo.
Okay, let's load this in.
That's what inspired Amber Lashak to found a company that makes custom furniture using construction waste.
Box truck life.
I have been called the queen of trash for obvious reasons because I make a life of transforming trash.
Like the $4,200 Condor couch. The plywood came from a building site, the frame is scrap metal, and an ice cream factory provided a barrel for the armrests. But turning trash into luxury furniture requires a skilled hand.
In 53 years in the business, I've done just about everything but use recycled materials.
Can the company make a dent in a city that generates 150 Statue of Liberty's worth of construction waste every day? We went to Brooklyn to see how Redo makes upscale furniture out of worldwide waste. The Redo team makes weekly runs to pick up materials from construction sites and companies around the Red Hook neighborhood.
I've actually put on a crown and a big dress. I'm gonna be the queen of trash. Why not? Knocking on doors and finding out what kind of trash people have, they don't forget you.
What's going on? Everything that we get is local. It's within 15 minutes of where we are.
See you again.
Let's see.
Just a few blocks away from Redo's home base, Eli Fernald is working on a 4-story residential building.
I'm happy for anybody who's getting involved to try to take construction material out of the waste stream that could very easily be reused.
Here they'll pick up wasted wood, masonry debris, and any other scraps Amber thinks could come in handy.
Okay, and then let's get some of that netting. Awesome. It's like a set, but this is one part and this is another part.
They plan what they'll make from recovered waste at weekly design meetings.
The first construction site we went to had all this netting, which I think is super amazing. It's incredibly durable.
First, they sketch out designs before making a virtual 3D mock-up. Then they move to the workshop.
They nicknamed it the Condor couch. I don't know who came up with that name, but it's pretty interesting.
Andres Diepa starts by cutting a metal barrel in half, which comes with unique problems.
It had a purpose at some point in time, so you never know the finishing on it, the painting, there's sometimes toxic materials.
He then welds each half onto a metal frame and attaches the legs. Kayakan Nonteveth handles the shelves under the armrests. He's been repurposing waste since he was a kid.
My dad, he always have like just these reclaimed things, as like a panel for a wall.
He cuts plywood boards down to size to build the shelves under the armrests. Then he smooths out any rough edges on the board.
It's a reclaimed piece of wood, so I had to sand down the oil.
Finally, he stains the shelves with a rag. Now that those shelves are complete, the upholsterer, Gary Wright, who worked for Redo when this video was filmed, steps in.
I do a lot, everything. I even spill blood sometimes.
For this couch, he's using recycled yoga mats and dead stock fabric, overstock materials that Redo sources from a local textile recycler. First, Gary staples padding down onto a wooden board which will become part of the seat. Then he carefully sews fabric to fit over the padded seats and cushions.
So I do every piece that I work on like it's going to, I don't know his first name, but last name Rockefeller.
Finally, the boards and cushions are placed on the metal frame to complete the Condor couch.
Okay, get the bottom. I got the top.
Some items Redo makes are one of a kind, like this 500-pound reclaimed oak table.
What does a custom job like that cost?
None of your business, no. The way that we price out our jobs with our clients really is just about materials and labor, and that's it.
Most items are made to order, but they keep their most popular products, like their benches and stools, in stock.
We originally said 3 o'clock. We're having a little bit of an issue right now. My main concern is the color differentiation.
With some of the custom projects, the team can work right up until delivery.
Where are the movers? They're not here. A lot of times, yeah, there is last minute stuff that needs to be done and it's showtime and you just gotta make sure it happens.
Gary uses fine brushes and tints that match the grain of the wood to cover those blemishes.
When you're dealing with recycled materials, you run into flaws and blemishes that you have to touch up.
We have the construction site, we have George, metal.
Amber worked in TV and film for 15 years before launching this business.
I had this sort of brewing sense that I wasn't contributing in the way that I really wanted to contribute.
That's when she scribbled out the idea to use construction waste to make furniture in her notebook.
There was a lot of work that went into seeing if something that was an idea in a notebook would come to fruition and really work.
After years of trial and error, the company says it has now used roughly 1.2 million pounds of waste. But that's just a drop in the bucket of a growing problem.
All right, come on.
As far as like overall waste pie, how much is construction and demolition waste? Maybe a little bit higher because New York never stops building, right?
In the 5 boroughs, developers are supposed to cart away their own waste. Some contractors bring their dumpsters here. Cooper Recycling sorts a whole lot of mixed construction and demolition waste.
On a typical day, we get between 450 and 500 trucks coming in with material.
We sort it with those excavators. We put it into our operating system where everything gets processed. What's recoverable gets extracted and separated according to its material type.
Concrete can be crushed to make new concrete, wood can be chipped, and metal can be refined and smelted for reuse. While the city has 22 facilities like this that sort and recycle construction waste, more than half of it still ends up in landfills. That's because a typical construction manager has almost no incentive to reuse waste.
The probably sad truth here is that there's not much money in it for you, construction manager, other than maybe metals.
So why would someone send their construction and demolition waste to Cooper? Because the company has a reputation for quickly processing debris from a job site.
You could be on the property for no more than 15 minutes.
Besides keeping waste out of landfills, companies that repurpose construction materials save a lot of energy, the equivalent of more than 85 million barrels of oil every year. Amber thinks her business model can work in other places. She plans to open redo locations in Miami, Hudson, New York, and other cities in the near future.
Each place will have a place where we manufacture on the spot, and we also do retail.
Other countries are further along in how they deal with construction waste. The United Kingdom manages to recycle 90%. And while the US has a long way to go before it catches up, Amber and her crew hope their model can inspire others.
Look at this.
People will look at it and say, hey, we could do that. And that's the whole point. We want a lot of companies to do this.
I think education is one of the most important ways that we can really get people to understand that there's value. You know, these are nutrients that they're throwing away, not garbage.
About 13 million tons of used shingles get torn off American roofs each year. These ones are on their way to be mixed into pavement that will be laid on U.S. highways. The popular roof covering can often be repurposed, but mostly ends up in landfills. Companies that make shingles often say they want their products recycled, but those sustainability pledges tend to fall flat.
They are not making anyone accountable. They're not going to make contractor accountable. They're not going to make landfill accountable. If landfill claims to do it, they're not going to come and investigate if they're actually doing it.
Not to mention, America isn't even building enough roads to use up all this waste. So the vast majority just keeps piling up. In 2021, one of the nation's biggest roofing manufacturers announced that it figured out how to turn used shingles back into new ones. But in an industry plagued by empty recycling promises, can this new technique keep one of the world's most popular roof types from becoming worldwide waste? Each asphalt shingle starts out as a thin sheet of fabric. It's coated in asphalt, which usually comes from crude oil. Then it's topped with tiny rocks, minerals, and metals. The technique was probably invented in the early 1900s. But cheaper wood shingles were more popular until the 1930s, when a push for fire safety forced towns across America to switch to asphalt. Some shingle makers also started adding a fire-resistant fiber in the base sheets that we now know to be poisonous.
It was natural that the scientists would turn to asbestos, for this is a remarkable mineral.
Millions of American workers were exposed before the risks became widely known. Though it's rare, some of this stuff could still be sitting on top of older houses today. So recyclers still have to be careful.
Obviously, we do not want to take asbestos-containing material and grind it up and liberate the asbestos into the atmosphere.
Manufacturers switched to a new material for the sheets in the 1970s.
Fiberglass, a fascinating manufacturing process.
So asphalt shingles stayed popular. Today, industry sources say about 3/4 of U.S. homes are topped with them, and the whole industry is worth about $7 billion. They work well in lots of climates and are often the cheapest option up front. But the mix of ingredients makes recycling them pretty tricky.
When asphalt and those materials sit on a roof for many years, those materials age and degrade. And being able to reclaim those materials can be very, very challenging.
So for years, the main way to recycle shingles has been to grind them into a fine powder that can be mixed into roads. Hundreds of trucks full of shingles arrive here every day. Most of them have been torn off old roofs. A waste management company called Demcon buries most of that stuff in its landfill. But about 1/4 of what they receive is leftover scrap from shingle factories that's cleaner and cheaper to process.
Manufacturers right now are generating enough waste material to meet the demands of the hot mix asphalt market.
An excavator dumps the shingles into a grinder. A screen separates big pieces from small ones.
1/4 inch and smaller ends up in one stockpile.
The larger pieces go through it all again. Then road makers mix this sandy black powder into asphalt pavement. It takes the place of fossil fuels and ingredients that have to be mined, which cuts down on greenhouse gases. When there's enough demand, they do process used shingles, but it gets messy.
We have laborers on a conveyor belt picking out the plastic, picking out the pop cans, picking out the wood, tree branches, any of the contamination. It's very labor intensive, very challenging.
What's also challenging is keeping track of who's actually recycling which kinds of shingle waste. So for example, one of the world's biggest roofing companies, called GAF, sponsors a website with a list of recycling options on it. The goal was to make it easier for contractors to recycle asphalt shingles. We found Demcon listed as an option. But Demcon had told us that it only recycles a small fraction of the used shingles arriving in those trucks every day. When we asked GAF about it, it said its website lists places that accept shingle waste, but acknowledged that recycling options are limited, and the vast majority of tear-off shingles go to landfills. About an hour after we reached out, someone updated the site with a clarification about Demcon's operations and removed 3 other Minnesota facilities from the list of recyclers. The specifics can be hard to pin down, but there are some states where recycling used shingles into roads seems to be working. Next door to Minnesota and Wisconsin, shingles used to make up 6% of landfill waste. Over the last 2 decades, that's gone down to just 0.1%. But adding in too much ground roofing material can make roads more brittle, and that means more potholes, which are usually caused by extreme temperatures. Only about half the states allow shingle waste in their roads. And in 2015, Colorado regulators officially declared shingles can't be recycled at all. That's because recycling companies were getting paid to take the waste, then just letting it pile up. In Texas, a failed roofing to roads venture from 2018 left behind a mountain of shingles. Piles like these can contaminate nearby air, soil, and water. And where recycling efforts fall through, shingles are taking up more and more space in landfills, which are filling up in some states.
We do believe at some point communities are going to forbid asphalt shingles from going into landfills.
That would be a huge problem for companies like GAF, which says its product is on 1/4 of all American homes. It says better recycling techniques are a must.
We figured if we could do this, we could probably save, quite honestly, the asphalt roofing industry.
It took over a decade of research to develop the company's recycling method. GAF engineers had to make sure recycled shingles would be as strong, durable, and weather-resistant as brand new ones. And they couldn't be more expensive than the alternative.
All of the sustainability efforts should be at cost neutral or better.
Engineers here say they've cracked the code. The company opened up this demonstration plant last year.
Roof tear off is brought into the facility and sorted and inspected to make certain that the material is of sufficient quality to go through our process.
That means the shingles can't be mixed with any other waste.
The shingles are ground into roughly silver dollar sized pieces.
And magnets filter the mixture at several stages in the process.
Nails and other metallic contaminants are removed and then are funneled into metals recycling processes.
The nail-free blend gets ground down even more.
To separate out the asphalt-rich parts of the waste stream from the asphalt-poor parts of the waste stream.
These machines grind, shake, and sift the mixture until the rocky granules are filtered out.
We need to drive the purity of our asphalt briquettes as high as possible to make shingles with recycled content that perform as best as possible.
This machine presses the asphalt mixture to make it more portable.
The asphalt briquettes are dissolved in virgin asphalt and used to make new shingles.
But at first, new shingles will only contain about 7% recycled material.
Our intent is to get to 40 to 50% recycled content in the shingles.
To do that, GAF has to do more research and scale up.
Our ultimate goal by 2030 is to have enough capacity across the US to be diverting at least 1 million tons of shingle waste per year from landfills into our process.
That would still be less than 1/10 of the old shingles that get torn off American homes each year.
I think it's a good start. Do I think it's enough to save us in the next 5 years from filling up landfills with asphalt shingles? I don't.
But the company says that eventually, all of its shingle plants will use at least some of the recycled briquettes and granules. Ultimately, companies don't have to keep their sustainability promises. But one former industry player wants to hold them accountable. Dmitry Lipinski installed roofs for 7 years, and often found he had nowhere to take used shingles besides landfills.
One of the most frustrating things was to dump shingles on landfill, but also seeing marketing promise that manufacturers asking us to pass to the homeowner.
He says exaggerated recycling claims sway consumers toward asphalt shingles.
We're influencing buying decision and misleading homeowner from real green options. I think more homeowners would pick a different roofing system if they knew the truth.
As a contractor who made a living installing roofing, he found it difficult to challenge shingle producers to do better.
You know, if you're in the game, it's very hard to go against manufacturer or expose manufacturer because they might not sell you shingles.
So he sold his business in 2021 and launched a YouTube channel about the industry.
We expose the bad, the ugly, and highlight the best practices. Welcome back to Roofing Insights channel, where you can find the truth about the roofing industry. All of this manufacturers say the same thing. We are the leader. We recycle. We're sustainable. We are green.
Most major manufacturers say their roofs last for decades. But storms can shorten that. Dmitry says other options might actually cost less in the long run.
You might pay double or triple for rubber shingle, but that shingle will last 30, 40 years.
Still, asphalt shingles rule the North American market. But globally, alternatives like clay, metal, wood, and concrete roofs are often more popular and can last longer. Of course, every roof needs to be replaced eventually. And GAF acknowledges that suppliers need to take responsibility for where their product ends up.
Anything that you're making, you should have some understanding or at least consideration for what happens to those products. I just think it's part of good corporate hygiene and citizenship.
Coal mining has ruined millions of acres of land across the U.S. And it can pollute the surrounding areas for decades after the coal is gone. Now, these farmers are restoring coal mining land with lavender. Can this farm be a model for lands destroyed by coal mining across the country? We went to Ashford, West Virginia to find out.
When I signed up, I found out it was a lavender farm. I said, ain't no way. I never heard of a lavender farm. I kind of like it. It's my new home.
Aaron Morgan worked as a coal miner for a decade.
You know, I'm not the only ex-miner here. There's a lot of ex-coal miners here.
He never imagined he would be picking flowers on coal mining land.
It's strange to me that it's been farmed now. Yeah, because it's really just all rock. It's a wasteland, really.
Appalachian Botanical Company, or ABCO, is on a retired part of a larger coal mine.
Let's go over and meet some of the guys.
My name's Frank. I've had an assortment of jobs. I like this one the best.
I don't even work here. I just come to be.
We do turn a good section of this mountain purple during the blooming season.
The business is part of a reclaiming process that rebuilds the landscape with new vegetation. But it's complicated and costly. Imagine blasting the top off of a mountain and then trying to rebuild it piece by piece. Growing plants in the soil on mines is tough, but luckily,
Lavender loves poor soils.
and this sweet-smelling herb can actually reduce toxic heavy metals in the soil.
We make sure the soil tests come back so that there's no heavy metals, no toxins of any kind.
The team harvests the lavender throughout the summer and early fall. ABCO uses every part of the flower, so nothing goes to waste.
I need like 35 pounds of these buds cut off by tomorrow.
They spread the lavender on the floor to cut the buds and bundle the stems to sell for cooking.
We strip the bottom 2 leaves off and we'll dip that in water and rooting hormone.
They save small leaf clippings and plant them to grow more lavender.
This is the 40-gallon pot. That's a 26-gallon.
Matt Carter boils water to steam distill about 40 pounds of lavender to make essential oil.
Everybody knows that oil is lighter than water. The oil floats to the top. Just strain the water off of it, which we keep the water too.
They filter the oil 3 times before bottling it up. They also use the flowers to make creams, honey, salt, and hand sanitizer.
Ready.
Finally, the leftover plant biomass is transformed into compost. Coal companies are legally required to restore the land they have mined. After a company drills and blasts a deep pit, it piles all the broken rock and topsoil back into it to reshape the landscape. All that earth gets compacted down to prevent erosion and runoff. They plant some sort of vegetation and clean the water if need be. An old mine can become any number of things, like a grassland, a home, or, in the case of ABCO, a farm. But does the land actually go back to what it was like before?
It's still fairly rare, I think, for reclamation to be done well.
Mike is reforesting a 2,500-acre surface mine that has already been reclaimed. But he says growing trees in the rocky, compacted soil is really challenging. They have to rip the soil sometimes 3 or 4 feet to plant anything here.
When you stop the mining, it doesn't mean that the pollution stops.
Layers of rock that have been deep in the earth for millennia are now exposed.
And so they become very active chemically when they're exposed to water. Pollutants leach off of those materials for decades, if not hundreds of years.
Hundreds of thousands of acres of mining land across the U.S. coalfields haven't been reclaimed yet.
If the mine is stopped and reclamation activity stops, these mines just sort of sit, often as, wastelands of bare soil and rock.
And there's a fear that as the coal industry continues to decline, more land could go to waste. ABCO hopes to expand its farm onto this patch of partially reclaimed land on the mine. But for now, it sits idle.
You can look out there and see all the nasty water just sitting out there and laying. It's awful, man. We ain't even allowed out there, and I'm assuming that's the reason we're not allowed out there.
What is most likely is that these mining companies will end up going bankrupt, leaving this partially or unreclaimed land without following through on the reclamation obligations.
Unreclaimed mining land can lead to more flooding and landslides.
The coal companies stopped working, which meant they also stopped fixing any of the problems that they had created.
Companies only became responsible for cleaning up old mines in 1977. Before that, they simply abandoned them. There are over 6 million acres of abandoned coal mines across the country, and they're releasing heavy metals and other toxins into the water and air.
You can come in and take some of these off.
Businesses like Abco are working to both restore the land and provide jobs here in Boone County, as coal is on its way out. The farm has doubled in size since it broke ground in 2019.
Well, that's a lot of flowers. That's a lot of lavender. It's a lot of work. That's a lot of employment.
Along with employing former coal miners, Abco also hires people in long-term drug recovery.
I like working here because they gave me the opportunity to show that my past is in the past. They were still willing to work with me, and it was great that somebody gave me a chance to show that I can do this.
And so when we reclaim, we don't just reclaim land. We reclaim land, people, communities, everything.
Reclaiming mine land is one step toward a post-coal future. The Biden administration has committed to investing $260 million in reclamation efforts for states and tribes. And Abco hopes to use some of that money to expand the business to more of West Virginia.
If that is funded, it will enable us to set up a new farm location in a neighboring county and set up a regional community hub there.
But the U.S. government is still adding one more hurdle to cleaning up abandoned mine land. The proposed infrastructure bill would reduce the tax on coal production that funds these reclamation projects.
The Appalachian region, they've sacrificed a lot for energy that has really built this country. We, as a nation, owe it to this region to fix some of these inadequacies.
Appalachia has a long way to go to clean up the mess created by generations of mining. But these flowers give hope for a blossoming future.
A lot of times you get a ripple effect in the water, right? We don't make a ripple, we make a wave.
Owner Pierre DeBog has been running Park Avenue International since 1982. And he was skeptical when his son, Alex DeBog, came up with the idea for the totes.
I'm old-fashioned. I came to the United States during the Civil War in Lebanon, and after 5 years I opened my own factory. I was against this because I say, you're gonna waste your time. We're gonna buy garbage bags.
The idea came to Alex one night when he was taking out the trash.
I realized if this is one family's garbage on a single week, what are the other 8.5 million people in New York City doing? The construction and the design of the plastic woven was pretty much inspired by this. This is a 10 by 6 foot carpet that I made, all from repurposed, upcycled leather scraps and remnants that were, on the cutting room floor. I figured if I could do this with leather, why can't I do this with plastic? And, after 6 months of trial and error, we were able to figure out the right technique.
Alex and his team start by separating plastic bags by size. The shop already had all the right equipment.
So these are the same machines that we use for pretty much any leather good construction.
They fuse the bags together using a heat sealer and cut them into long strips. They spool the strips into something like yarn, which is then woven together using a hand loom.
Trabajar con plástico es una experiencia nueva, es diferente. Pero también, veo que es importante porque ayudamos a salvar nuestro mundo, nuestro planeta.
It took Ruben about 2 days, 2.5, 3 days to weave all this.
Figuring out how to combine soft and harder plastics took some troubleshooting.
So in the beginning, when we first started this, we were using all soft plastic bags, like the single use that you get at a supermarket. But we noticed when we took it off the roll, the bag wouldn't stand up on its own. So we went back to the drawing board and I started using the heavier plastics that were coming through the factory and mixing that in with the softer plastics. So it's a lot stronger now. This bag could probably easily hold at least 50 to 75 pounds.
It takes nearly 4 hours to make just one bag. Finally, they cut out the size of the bags and stitch on the binding and handles. It takes about 95 plastic bags to make the Any bag, which is short for a New York bag. So far, they've sold nearly 300 Any bags. In the beginning, Alex collected plastic from friends and family.
You know, you could see the Dwayne Reeds in there, the CVS, the Home Depots, you know, the Isle of New York bags in there. Here we have about 22 garbage bags full of plastic that we've collected in the last 6 months. Pretty much nothing we're not using, from bubble wrap to heavy plastic film to shopping bags to bread wrapping. I mean, anything that has a plastic bag, we're stripping it down and using it.
But he's scaled up his operation in the past year. He's partnered with fashion retailers and even elementary schools to collect their unwanted plastic. Now, he has more than 8,000 pounds of material to work with. Anybag's $133 price point might seem steep, but Alex markets it as a luxury item.
The cost of the Anybag really reflects the process of the making of it. The weaving process alone is very time consuming, which costs a lot of money, especially being here in New York City.
The common grocery bag is made of polyethylene plastic. It was first patented in 1965, and by the mid-'80s it had gained real traction over the paper bag in American supermarkets. In many ways it's a brilliant invention. It's thin, stretchy, strong, and cheap to make. Today we go through 1 trillion bags worldwide every year, most of which are made with fossil fuels. One study found that the average bag is used for 12 minutes and then thrown out. Less than 10% of them are ever recycled. And they're one of the most commonly littered items on the planet. They're light and easily shredded, which means they can wreak havoc on animals and ecosystems alike. The world's most populous countries are starting to ban many kinds of single-use plastics. China's already banned plastic bags and straws in some places this year, and a nationwide ban will take effect by 2025. India has a similar law that goes into effect in 2022. In the US, 8 states have passed some form of bag ban. New York's went into effect in October of 2020. It had been delayed for 7 months following a lawsuit and the pandemic. But they're still everywhere. The law prevents large chains from offering plastic bags, but there are exemptions for things like takeout food, prescription drugs, newspapers, and garment bags. And enforcement is rare. The state has only fined 14 businesses a total of $27,250 for violating the ban. So do these laws actually reduce waste? Kenya enacted one of the strictest bans in 2017, with harsh penalties for any violations. The Kenyan government says 80% of people now comply with the law, and the country has begun to issue bans on other single-use plastic items. California was the first U.S. state to enforce a plastic bag ban in 2016. A study published 3 years later found thin plastic bag use was down by more than 70%, but that people spent more on paper and sturdier plastic bags. Taxing consumers who choose plastic bags is a more effective way to limit their use, according to some experts. There's always tote bags, which certainly last longer, but as Alex notes, they come with costs of their own.
You have to remember that, in order to create an alternative, they need to manufacture something new. So with that manufacturing comes CO2 emissions and carbon footprints. So the best solution out there is really to upcycle. And when I say upcycle, it's taking what's already out there, what's existing, giving it a second life, giving it a second use, or get creative, which is what I'm doing with the Anybag.
The company's not taking in any more plastic donations at the moment, but that doesn't stop Pierre from scouting potential material for more Anybags.
Yes, I do joke with my son in the morning when we're driving. And the west side, I see those plastic hanging in the trees. I tell him, look, I want you to stop, take those plastic, he start laughing. I say, come on, Dad, not that much.